Well, you certainly don't hear this one every day, and thank goodness for that, because a Michigan family had trusted a home inspector to look over their property as they got ready to sell, but when they checked their home security system, they spotted him violating their trust in one of the most egregious ways imaginable. He was pleasuring himself in the child's nursery with an Elmo toy. Yeah, pretty sickening stuff here. We'll go over how this unfolded, what happened to him, and how this could have escalated if he hadn't been caught. And I'm going to break it all down with renowned predator catcher Chris Hansen. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. I think it's probably fair to say it's one of the most disturbing home security videos I've ever seen, and I have been doing this job for quite some time. We go back, unfortunately, to March of 2021. A family in Oxford Township, Michigan, outside of Detroit, was putting their house up for sale. So they called in a home inspector, as one would normally do, except everything that I'm about to tell you is not normal. You see, that home inspector was Kevin Wayne VanLuven, of nearby Clarkston. And according to local reporting, the family wasn't home when the then 59-year-old arrived to do the inspection. The homeowner, Jada Dodson, was alerted that there had been movement on the camera in the nursery. So we're talking the room of a reported 2-year-old, okay? So she clicked on the video to see how things were going in that room, and what she saw instead was VanLuven standing at the open closet door, his back to the camera, appearing to, I'm sorry to say this, but appearing to pleasure himself with an object. And as he turns around and zips up his pants, you can see what that object is. He is holding a red Elmo doll. A red Elmo doll. Yeah. Walks across the room, places the doll somewhere off camera, and as he adjusts it, you can actually hear that signature Elmo laugh on the security camera. Tell me that's not just the most incredibly unsettling thing you've seen, but we got to bring in Chris Hansen to talk about this. Renowned predator catcher, host of Takedown on TruBlu and the podcast Predators I've Caught. Chris, good to see you. Happy New Year.
All I can say is poor Elmo.
Yeah.
I mean, I've confronted Jesse hundreds of predators in my career, but never one who was preying on a child's toy. A Sesame Street character. And what a sacrilege this is. And how do you even begin to get into the mind of somebody who does this? I mean, you've got a guy who's a home inspector, right? He's supposed to be protecting you, protecting your interest or the interest of the buyer, perhaps in this case. And he does this in the privacy of somebody's home. It's disturbing.
It makes me wonder if there was a plan. If he knew, like, does he just walk in and find a toy that he, or is it like, I'm trying to make sense of it, I can't. But it makes me wonder if this was, in a way, premeditated.
Well, two things come to mind. One is, what is this guy's plan when he walks into any home? And why does it turn him on, apparently, to do this to a child's toy? And if you follow the psychology of many predators and criminals, is this something that would have continued into a more violent human contact crime? I mean, the rule, a guy starts as a peeping Tom, he then turns into potentially a sexual assault type of person and maybe even a killer. That's the progression. So if this guy's starting with assaulting a child stuffed animal, does this grow into something else? What is he trying to get out of this here? What motivates somebody like this?
I know somebody starts every crime it has to start with one crime, but it makes me wonder, is this his first time?
Yeah, I mean, what makes a guy wake up, right?
Yeah.
Go to work. Let's see what's next on the list. 5203 whatever drive. There's a child's toy. Let me go do this to it. It's very disturbing and difficult to understand, but you have to wonder what next.
And you make a great point about what happens if there was a child there. What could have happened? That's a scary thing. But talk to me about, in your experience, do you see predators, attaching themselves to, maybe it's a different kind of toy or it's an inanimate object of some kind? I'm sure in your experience, you've seen people who have these attachments and do things to dolls. You know what I'm talking about. So I wonder if there was something.
What is the attraction here, though?
I don't know.
What is the attraction to a child's toy? And does it have something to do with actually being attracted to a child? You have to wonder that. I was going through the podcast notes to record later today, and it's a guy who stone cold told me that he had no intention of harming this child, and 2 weeks later, he's busted in a hotel room with another child. Ugh. I mean, so what's the thought process, and where is it going? And if this is how he gets his satisfaction, his sexual gratification, when is that not enough, and when does he strike out at somebody who would be playing with that toy?
It's interesting you bring that up because I want to add a few more layers to this story. So Miss Dodson apparently watched this happen in real time. And she told the outlet WDIV back in 2021 that she was basically frozen while she watched this and couldn't even articulate what she was seeing to her husband when he asked what was going on. Now, Dodson immediately called police. Deputies confronted VanLuven, who at first told them he was just moving the doll out of the way so that he could inspect an electrical outlet. But when the deputies revealed that there was a camera in the room, he reportedly confessed. He apologized. It seems he probably should have known that he was likely being watched in the video as he stands back up, because VanLuven actually looks directly at the security camera. It's very chilling there. I mean, again, do these criminals, are they naive enough to think they're not going to get caught? Did he think there wasn't a camera there in a child's room?
Well, I think they get so caught up in the moment that they forget about everything except for the sexual gratification. It's just like the guy I referred to earlier. Here's a guy who got busted, was out pending an investigation, would have probably walked away from that case for a lot of different reasons. But 15 days later, he's in a hotel room with a 14-year-old girl. He's not getting away this time. So these guys, they tend to need to advance the level of their gratification to satisfy whatever fantasies they're chasing. And so what happens next, you know?
The fact that he confessed to it and didn't just say, I'm remaining silent. Do you see that? And look, I am not a psychologist, but do you see that happen a lot where they're like, you know, I'm caught, I want...
I'm caught, and he figures, well, what's the harm here? I'm going to get away with this, and in 6 weeks, nobody even remember that I was a guy who, you know, had my way with Elmo in somebody's house. And he'll move on, and unless there's some professional sanction, nobody's the wiser until and if he does something else.
And I'll get into his consequences in a minute. I am curious, though, this is a home inspector.
Yeah.
Do people should they always be home when somebody's there? I mean, how much do you have to monitor what's happening in your life or what's happening?
Apparently,
we talk about with school children. We talk about it with
apparently
nursery
a
schools,
lot.
Daycares.
This is something that makes me crazy in my personal life and in my professional life when I talk to people about security and safety issues. You need to know who's coming into your home. And if you're merely going on one of the social media platforms, Facebook Marketplace, and saying, well, there's a fellow who seems nice to come in and do some work, do you really know who that is?
Yeah.
You know, and we have ways of checking backgrounds, and I think you can't be too careful. And I think some of these services, some of these platforms that you can use, subscribe to check somebody's background are not a bad thing.
Now, this homeowner, Jada Dodson, told WDIV in 2021, what if he had an STD and our son played with that? What if we didn't know? We have a toddler and a newborn baby too. There's nothing worse than when somebody comes to your home and you trust them to do a job and they do something like that in your child's bedroom. She makes a good point.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there are health issues here. I mean, this is a human bodily fluid that perhaps was spread to an object that a child could have played with. Yeah. And it's disturbing. I keep using that word over and over again, but I don't know if there's any other word that aptly defines it other than that. It's horrible that somebody would do that.
And we also looked up Mr. VanLuven on TruthFinder, the powerful background checker that we use to research our stories. And VanLuven's conviction in this case for aggravated indecent exposure is there. We also found a guilty plea that he took in the 90s for apparently operating a vehicle while intoxicated, but we weren't really able to confirm the sentence for a case that far back. But Law&Crime, we partner with TruthFinder. We use it to get details on people involved in all of our stories. And look, even if you don't work in true crime, it can just be an excellent resource to give you some peace of mind. After all, it's one of the largest public record search services in the United States. And with a paid subscription service, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. So if you're interested right now, you can get 50% off of your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/LC sidebar. Okay, let's get back into this. You mentioned before something that was really interesting about, people who say they're not going to do anything again, they kind of repent, or what the consequences would be. So I mentioned VanLuven's conviction. So Oakland County, Michigan officials, they charge VanLuven with aggravated indecent exposure and malicious destruction of personal property less than $200. According to the Oakland Press, VanLuven's defense had argued that his genitals were never actually seen on the video, so the indecent exposure charge, that wasn't warranted. A jury disagreed. A jury convicted VanLuven in 2022 of the misdemeanor indecent exposure charge. He was acquitted, though, of the destruction of property count, according to reporting from Working RE magazine, since there was apparently no DNA that was found on the Elmo doll. Apparently the jury, that's why they couldn't find him guilty of that charge. Were you surprised by that decision?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard to predict what a jury does, but I think that, Jesse, one of the disturbing things about this case, and it reminds me of a case a few years back in Louisiana where there was a deputy sheriff, a ranking deputy sheriff who was highly thought of in the community, who actually put semen in cupcakes that his wife made and brought for school children to eat. So, what's the end game here? What is the fantasy they're trying to fulfill? And it turns out in this particular case in Louisiana, this guy was guilty of all kinds of other things. And he was a bad guy. And the sheriff in that particular parish took action, and he's now locked up in prison. But, there again, you have this very, abhorrent behavior, this shocking, who even thinks about this sort of thing? But he doesn't. Yeah. So you have to wonder, okay, what else is this person capable of, and what have they done?
Well, it's interesting because he was sentenced in December of 2022 to 19 days in jail with credit for time served, 18 months probation. He had also been undergoing mental health therapy prior to trial. The judge ordered that he continue with that until the therapist clinically discharged him. And during his sentencing, according to the Mercury News, VanLuven apologized, saying to the family, "It's difficult to express how sincerely sorry I am for the trauma and violation and disgust they must have felt. Not a day passes that I don't feel remorse and regret for my criminal activity on that day." He also apologized to his own family for the shame that he brought them. And according to court documents, VanLuven said that he intended to follow the sentence to the letter, but court records show he was convicted of violating his probation in January of 2024. So again, this idea of never going to do anything, I'll never do it, but
here you go. And that's a problem. So what do you do? I mean, I understand that this crime doesn't rise to the level of a crime committed against a child or an adult, but you see where we stand and who's monitoring this guy. I mean, clearly he violated the parole guidelines, the rules that he was supposed to which he was supposed to abide, and now he's in trouble again.
Chris, if you had the opportunity to sit down with this guy.
Oh, I'd love to.
What would you ask him? What would you want to know?
What was going on in your mind that made you do this? What's the fantasy? What were you fulfilling here? And why a child's toy? And why do you have to do this when you're supposed to be working? I mean, I'm not the morality police here. Adult sexual behavior is, generally speaking, the business of adults engaging in that sexual behavior. That's not what this debate is about. The debate is about why would you possibly do this and violate somebody's home, the sanctity of their home, where they raise their children, and think that that's okay? And where does this come from? That's what I'd like to know.
I think we'd all like to know that. I'll leave it with this. Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard said of this with respect to Mr. VanLuven: "Just when I think I have seen it all, someone steps up and surprises me with a new level of disturbing actions. Sadly, in today's world, we cannot take it on faith that the people we let into our homes can be trusted. We cannot always presume that employers have done their job and have confidence their employees are trustworthy and there to do the job for which they've been hired. This is a disgusting reminder to be cautious about who you let into your home. The actions of these homeowners will likely prevent this defendant from going into anyone else's home." Chris Hansen, thanks so much for coming on.
Jesse, I appreciate it. Always good to see it.
Oh, great to see you. You can check out Chris on TruBlu. Also, Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen. I encourage everybody to check it out. Thanks so much for taking the time. I'm sorry.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sorry this is the story we talked about.
That's kind of what we do here on this network, isn't it?
You're right. You're right. Good seeing you, Chris. All right, everybody. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.